You want basketball? We got you.
What about plays on the turf? We got you covered.
Or maybe even a knock right out of the park.
We give you our takes on the latest sports news, music, and anything trending around the world.
You are now in the clutch with Nia
And Malik. What's going on, y'all? In the Clutch podcast, back at it again, episode 3. And we got something special, Nia. We got something special going on today, don't we?
Real special, Malik Brown.
We got our first interview, Jared Johnston. Jared, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. I didn't know I was the first guest, so I feel special right now.
Oh yeah. You gonna turn it up for us. For us.
Oh yeah.
Definitely.
So Johnston, you were former Bowie State quarterback, you're a motivational speaker, real estate agent, and what you came to here to talk to us about today was your new book. And it's the Amazon's #1 newest release, from Cleats To Loafers and everything in between.
Yep.
But I guess before we get into the book and everything, I guess just talk about your background and where it all started for you.
Yeah, so for me, I am from Woodbridge, Virginia. If you guys are familiar with that area, it's about 30 to 45 minutes south of Washington, D.C., so I guess what they consider the DMV, depending on who you're asking. But I grew up in Woodbridge, Virginia with my brother and my mother and my grandmother starting off. And then my stepfather came into the picture, a few years later as I was near middle school. So in the beginning, it was, just us. My mother was somebody who was a strong single mother, so it didn't feel like you had a single mother, if anyone out there can relate. And my father, he lived in New York, because that's where my family's originally from. So my mother put my brother and I in sports from the beginning. From the age of 6 years old, I started playing basketball, and then I started playing football after that. So football was kind of my second love in the beginning. But from there, I, had challenges in middle school, and that's kind of how I drew a little closer to football, because I had went through some bullying and things like that. And football gave me that identity. It was a place of peace, a place of refuge that I can go to. And it was something that allowed me to, have a equal playing field with my other peers. And it gave me an upper hand. If you could tease me or mess with me in school, once we get on the field or on the court, that's out the window. So that's when I really started to gravitate towards football. And then from there, when in high school, didn't have the high school career most people would want. I only played one full season. Well, not even a full season. I only played 9 games in high school. So from there, I took the junior college route. Went to New Mexico Military Institute, and that is in Roswell, New Mexico. It's in the middle of nowhere. Very, very strict rules with the military. They said that's where aliens landed and all that stuff. So it was weird to say the least. But from there, the school didn't work out. Just the way they ran it. They had middle school kids telling us, to do 100 push-ups and things like that. So I said, you know what, I'm going to leave here. And I went to ASA College in Brooklyn, New York. And that's where I got the starting spot. And then from there, I had a scholarship offer to Bowie State. I had 2 D1 AA's. Norfolk State was offering me. Mississippi Valley State, they offered me the day I actually got my paperwork to leave ASA. And the reason I left and didn't wait for other D1s is because there was no meal plan or anything at my JUCO. So I was ready to just get out of there and play football and just go on from there. So I went to Bowie State. Like you said, and I got the jersey. I don't know if you can see it behind me. That's my jersey. So I got the frame, yeah. So I went to Bowie. It was a good experience. As a kid, and I know you guys may relate, with the HBCU, it's nothing I heard about when I was growing up. I never even heard about Bowie, and it's 45 minutes from me, until I was in junior college. And so going into it, I really wasn't too happy about going to a HBCU, to be honest. I thought that, it's not real football. I thought it's not real talent, real athletes. And when I got there, I was, I was proved wrong. And it was a place where they do take football serious. And one thing I wish I did when I was at the HBCU, Bowie State, is I wish I got to know my professors or the faculty on the campus more, because I feel at a HBCU, it's a little smaller community. Of course, it's your own people, so they may care a little bit more versus a PWI about you and your future. So I wish I took a little more advantage of that, in creating leverage with those faculty and staff and things like that. But overall, it was a great experience. And from there, didn't have any NFL shot, which I wanted, which every kid wants, whatever sport they're playing. And, I felt that I should have had at least a CFL, look, or something like that. But me and my head coach really didn't get along too well. We saw things from different perspectives. Just the way the team was ran, I wasn't really a fan of, weightlifting. Some guys not going to weightlifting and then starting on Saturday. So, and I'm the type to voice my opinion, especially being a quarterback as well. So, that didn't happen. So I went down to Georgia and I actually started training to get on with the AFL team, a CFL team or whatever, and ended up in the Professional Indoor Football League, which is a step below the AFL. And I got there, ended up getting cut like the second game of the season. But I thought I was doing good. I made the lineup first game of the season, and there was guys from like the New York Jets there, guys that was 5-star athletes out of high school. So, I was, up there with the competition, and they told me they had to cut me because they needed room for offensive lineman. So from there, I went to another team in the same league and ended up tearing my PCL the first game of the season. And then I did rehab and it never healed. It took me a few months where I could even run or jump, like I regularly can. So from there, I just decided to hang up the cleats. And it wasn't the easiest transition. It was very difficult because you come from the age of 6 to 23, playing one sport and believing that you're going to make your dream a reality and be able to do all the things you want to do for yourself, for your family, and things like that. And when it doesn't happen, it's kind of like you hit a dead end. You have to find yourself all over again. You really have to transition. And one of the reasons I wanted to write the book and I felt inclined to write it is because I feel there's a lot of athletes that go through that transition phase and they don't know what to do or aren't prepared, the right way. So then it led me here a little bit.
Okay.
Wow.
That's just,
That's dope.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I can relate to you definitely 100%.
Right.
Because, I went the JUCO route. I went to
Okay.
Division I. I hooped at HBCU. And
Yeah.
so, a lot of people don't understand or really know just as athletes how hard it is because you train, you work so hard and you don't make it professionally. And it's like my whole life has been dedicated to this and my whole life has been controlled around this sport, going to college and being on the strict schedule. And then you got to go to practice, you got film, you got to make sure you keep your grades up. So it's so much. And then it's like you kind of move on and now this sport is no longer, you're physically no longer playing it.
Right.
And so what I've noticed, not too many athletes, former collegiate athletes, have a good turnaround if they don't play professionally, unfortunately. And then you have your group that does. But it's hard because you do try and find your identity. You try and find who you are. What is your talents? What else can you do other than play this sport? So if nobody understands you, I do.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate that. But it is something that I think it needs to be spoken about more. I know it is becoming a topic with the whole More Than the Athlete campaign that people are doing, but I feel like, and from my personal experiences, one thing that never made sense to me was I played with a guy who went to UCLA. He was a top recruit coming out of high school, and he was down in Georgia in the PIFL with me. And one day we were riding around in the car with 2 other teammates, and on the way to go to the mall, we just started making stops. And the stops we were making was for him to do, illegal activity and things like that. And the thing that blew my mind was, how do you have an athlete that goes to a top 25 institution academically, probably top 10 in academics, and you're surrounded by people who are going to become CEOs of Fortune 500 companies years down the line. You're around the alumni who have businesses that they own. They have so many doors that they can open for you, but a lot of our athletes, they'll go to school and leave an environment that they didn't want to be in, but once they leave school, they go right back to that environment. And for me, it can be a stretch depending on who you asking, depending on your experience. But the way I see that is sort of like the recidivism rate with prison. If you go into prison, you go there for whatever years you're there, and then you come out. A lot of times, you may not learn the necessary skills to survive in society and flourish. And a lot of times, I've seen personal experience where guys who, once the season's over, their eligibility is gone, they don't even finish school, and then
Right.
they go back home, they get into this, that, and the third because maybe pressures that they have of having to provide for a child that they have and things like that. And I think it's something that really needs to be taken hold of. And, I just feel like if I could voice my opinion as much as I can, if it can help one kid, then they help somebody else. I think that's the way to go about it.
And that is a big thing as far as helping other people with your story as well. Just like you said football was basically on your mind, like since you were little on to college. That was your plan A basically. I know you talk a lot about plan B.
Mhm.
So as far as plan B, when do you think it's important for these kids and these parents as well to start thinking about, okay, if this doesn't work out for my child or me personally, when is it time to start thinking, okay, there needs to be another thing that maybe they can keep up or catch up on?
Right. That's a good question. Yeah, the plan B, I never had a plan B. My mother, she would ask me a couple times, "What's your plan B?" After my first serious injury, when I broke my ankle in high school, she asked me, and I said, "I don't need a plan B." Like they say a plan B distracts you from a plan A, and
Right.
I believe that. But I believe that's true in certain avenues because you look at a football player or NBA player or whatever sport, you have a shelf life, and your shelf life may be 30 years old versus somebody who is an engineer. You can do that until you're 80 years old. You know what I'm saying? So I
Yeah.
can understand when you say don't have a plan B, but I believe in sports you definitely should have one, and I say as early as possible. Um, because you got to think about it. At the age of, say, 10 years old, you may be able to dissect a playbook, for the team that you play for. If you got the ability, the mental capacity to dissect the entire playbook and go out on game day, memorize it, in a matter of a second, you should be able to dissect other type of information that you can use, long, way past your playing days. So I think as early as I would say maybe 10 years old. It depends on the child because you want your child to have a childhood. You don't want them to just, 5 years old, oh, you're studying, you know, engineering and things like that. What some cultures do. I know like the Indian culture is very big in that. But I say if they're at the point where they can understand concepts in a sport, they should also be able to understand all types of information.
Yeah, that's real. Why do you think that a lot of guys kind of fall for that just plan A and they don't think about long term? Like eventually, like we're all gonna stop being athletes. The football is not gonna be thrown anymore. You're gonna stop dribbling the basketball at one point in your life, whether you make it professional or not. Why is it that us as athletes we get so comfortable thinking like this is gonna be my life? Because I know it's instilled in us saying, "Oh, football is life, basketball is life," but it's so much more than that. So why do you think we get so comfortable with just that idea of plan A?
I think it's more so the perception that society puts out there for a lot of people because, and not even to get into the whole racial divide, but from any walk of life, you turn the TV on, you see the NBA games, you see the NFL games front and center, prime time. I mean, they even show them on Sundays when the football season is over. They show them basketball games, so they put sports in front of you, which I don't have any problem with. Sports is definitely a tool that you can use to propel you in life if you go about it the right way. But I think it's society forcing that perception on you. And then if we want to break it down to the certain communities, if you talk about the African American communities, I mean, if you just go back in history, there was never a point where African Americans were, encouraged to learn anything outside of entertainment. So I think that is kind of generational, and I think now it's starting. The curse is, quote unquote, curse is starting to be broken because there's social media, there's internet. A lot of people are finding a whole lot of other endeavors they can get into. But the number one thing I think is just perception, and then also seeing somebody that looks like you doing something other than football or basketball, things like that.
Now, I know probably you and Nia can attest to this. As far as being a student athlete, there's a lot of things that you have to juggle. Like as far as, I mean, you have to play a game one night, and then you may have a test the next day, next morning. Like it's just a lot of things that you have to deal with. So as far as that plan B, thinking of a plan B, how does, and you said it earlier, you said plan A, I mean, your plan B can distract you from your plan A. So how can you avoid that happening as far as things just getting juggled all in once and being able to actually think about having a backup option if plan A doesn't work?
Yeah, for me, if I could go back, I would begin to kind of just look into other opportunities, whether just going on Google, anything that piques my interest, just Google how to become, if somebody wants to be a chef, how to become a chef. And then from there, with like Instagram being so prominent, you can go on Instagram and literally find a chef that's in your area, your region, and send them a DM and say, hey, if you have any time, I would like to, help you with anything that you need, provide value to them. And then from there, you start to get into a relationship with that person, a mentorship, and you begin to find out about a whole nother career field. So I think that just, going after anything that piques your interest, research it, and then find a way where you can get involved in it, whether it's going to networking events, especially in college. When I was in college, there was a lot of networking events going on that I would hear some people talk about, like at a hotel down the street. But, I rarely went. I only went once when I tried to get into like a network marketing thing. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with network marketing, but I was like, yeah, it's not it or whatever. But I think that, and then also doing something that you're really passionate about as far as a major when you get into college, because my major was criminal justice, which I actually, it became pretty interesting as I went along in the curriculum and things like that. But the reason I went with criminal justice is because from my junior college, that's the only major that transferred all of the credits. So me being tunnel vision thinking football, 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 I was like, all right, I gotta do criminal justice. I didn't know nothing about it. Never wanted to be in law enforcement at all. So I was just like, all right, going with the flow. And majority of the team, probably 90% of my team in JUCO was criminal justice majors. And everybody went to school and was able to play right away. So I would have maybe looked into something different that really interests me. But also, one of the classes I took within criminal justice was forensics. And that was a class that I really liked. I don't know if you guys ever, watched, I think NCIS or something like that, but basically solving murders and things like that. It was something that really interests me. But even then, I was still so focused and tunnel vision on football. I didn't even try to get into an internship. I didn't try to talk to my teacher and find out about career paths and things like that. So I think another thing is interning. And I know with some sports it can be hard because, being a starter, especially depending on your position, I couldn't miss a practice. One practice a week being a quarterback. I was like, nah, I can't do that. And then I seen some teammates who would try and work. And then if they're working in the off season and they miss a morning workout, okay, next man up, you're not starting anymore. So with that, it comes pressures of thinking, okay, if I'm really focused on my post-athletic career and I really intern and put as much attention to that as I am football, is that going to, threaten my scholarship and things like that? So I think that's something that coaches have to hash out with recruits as they're coming into the school. And I think that can go a long way with helping with the plan B.
How can future student athletes come in and they kind of change that? Because there's going to, eventually you're going to have to change some things because especially at HBCUs, and that of course maybe a good 1% will make it professionally to the NFL, NBA, WNBA, whatever it is. But how can future student athletes come into being a part of this program and then being at this school, how they can change the narrative and be able to not only focus on that sport, but also focus on their future goals and aspirations?
I think that the student athlete and plus the parent or whoever's the guardian of that student athlete, I think that they need to speak up a little more and just show that, their son is coming here on a scholarship. And I understand you go to school on a scholarship, like football is your priority, even though, you know, education, of course, is a priority as well. But football is first, and you shouldn't do anything to take away from, you know, excelling, you know, at your best, especially a violent sport like football where you got to know what your teammates doing. So it's tough to miss practices because if you don't, you can end up, you know, on a stretcher, unfortunately, in the middle of a game. But I think if we speak up when we're on these recruiting visits and we start to ask questions and ask them, okay, what are you going to do for me in the off season that's going to help me make sure that I reach success once I leave this university? What programs do you have? Do you have anything that I can get into as far as internships? Am I only allowed to do an internship my senior year? Because when I was in school, I didn't do an internship until my last semester, and I got off the hook and only did 2 weeks of an internship. It was supposed to be a whole semester long. So, you know, I really didn't learn anything at all. I didn't have the time to learn anything. But again, as athletes, we still have to take the ownership, you know, and ask those questions long before we get on campus.
Yeah, and we talk about the parents a lot, but just talk about how important actually are the coaches in this type of process as well, just as far as like building your future 4 or 5 years down the line.
Yeah. Well, the coaches, I think that's kind of a tough point right there because, you know, the coaches are there to coach. You know, they're getting paid to coach. They're getting paid to win games and run a program. So I think that, of course, they should be open to allowing athletes other avenues to explore and find out more about themselves, find out what they like in career paths. But I think it should just, like every university should have one or a few people that's designated to helping athletes in that area, because I don't recall having anyone there that made themselves, you know, made their presence known to us, that they're there to help us post athletics. They're there to help us. I mean, even when it comes to, you know, mentally, therapy, things like that. I think that's stuff that should be, you know, put in place because the coaches, they have a heavy load, you know what I'm saying? But that still doesn't mitigate the fact that they should also be pushing that for our athletes.
Man, I can relate to you so much. Like, this is crazy. Like, I mean, and it's crazy because it's like you hear the same stories
Yeah,
no matter where you went.
right.
And it's like, when are we going to change the narrative of, you
Mhm,
know, going through the NCAA or wherever you play
mhm,
to have a better experience? Because you're right. I know for me personally, none of that was ever set up for me. You know, thankfully that for me, I had my head on my shoulders. You know, I knew what I wanted to do and stuff like that. But then I had teammates who didn't know what the heck they wanted to do, you know, basketball, basketball, basketball.
right.
And so there was never anybody like a therapist around. There was no life coach around. There was nobody there
Mhm,
to mentor or help us push through other than the sport.
mhm,
So it's amazing that you brought that up because, I mean, again, like that's something that a lot of people just don't get,
yeah.
you know, and
And it's
it
it's
sucks.
interesting though because you talk about therapists and then that comes into the budgeting of the school. So then you got to look at,
Mhm.
okay, you know, how long will it take for HBCUs to get that
Right.
type of treatment before the PWI, before Virginia Tech and things like that. So I think that's definitely something that should be, you know, pushed a lot. I think a lot of young people that are in, you know, psychologists, they should be the ones to get involved with these schools because they could relate to these kids. But yeah, I definitely think it's something that's so overlooked and people don't understand it until they get on the other side or they have a child that's in school and they, you know, find out from them. But yeah, you would think it is something in place for that because they have everything else in place. But you know, it's gonna take time though.
Yeah.
So as far I know you talk a lot about formulating an identity. So what were some of the things that came through your life that you knew that you figured out like football was taking over your life basically, for the good or the bad?
So for me, like I said, going back to middle school when I, you know, dealt with a lot of bullying in middle school, it was terrible. And it had me questioning a lot of things at such a young age. You're talking 11 to 13 years old. I started to question, you know, is my family really my family? Is my father my father? Is my mother my mother? I started to believe that I was adopted because, and just being transparent, people would tease me and think I'm from a different country or whatever, you know, because of my features or my hair and things like that. So that messed with me a lot. And that's why I really immersed myself in football at a young age. Also, another thing, and I didn't realize this until I actually was writing my book, was that throughout all these years, my father, we never lived in the same home. So the majority of the time that I would see him, my brother and I would see him, is because of sports. So he'll come to every game for the most part and make that 4-hour drive. Even when I got in college and he was in Georgia, he'd drive up to a good amount of the games, in Maryland, or if we're down in North Carolina. So I saw that as being the magnetic force, you know what I'm saying, that bridged the gap between myself and my father. Then I also saw how my brother stopped playing sports, but even though he wasn't playing, me playing allowed all three of us to form, a better father-son relationship. So of course, not me not knowing it, I just kind of continued to gravitate towards the sport. As I kept going along, it gave me confidence. It allowed me to, I guess, have some type of, known presence on campus and things like that. But I never took the identity that was formed on me and tried to use it negatively or be some cocky person and things like that. It just was something that made me feel good. So, once it's taken from you, you start to think, okay, I got all of my friends from football for the most part. Maybe even, girlfriends or whatever, they see you playing football. And then you start to think about your relationship with your father and things like that. And, you start to think, okay, is our relationship going to suffer now because I'm not playing? And once I did stop playing, it was a lot of times where we wouldn't talk much. We went from talking multiple times a week when I'm playing to maybe once every 2-3 weeks, maybe go a month without, picking up the phone to call. So those are the things that, I dealt with as far as, forming an identity through sports. And I think that as we're going through this journey to trying to reach that highest level or get that scholarship, you just got to be aware of all of the other things that the characteristics you possess and all the other things that you can do. And also the parents have to know that too, because my father actually, he got in an argument with my stepmother when I was in Georgia one time because she told him, maybe he doesn't want to play football, maybe he wants to do something else. And they got in just a heated argument right in front of me. And it just shows that parents, they also have to realize that they need to transition as well once, their child finishes playing.
Yeah, that's real. Because mentally and emotionally, it does take an effect on you. So how did you kind of pull yourself out of that? Because I know from one moment you kind of were a little depressed and just trying to figure out what's next for you.
Yeah. So for me, the first thing was just having people around you know what you're going through, because I've always been the type to keep things in, never really express myself. And a lot of times as men, of course, sometimes you're taught, bottle things up, don't show emotions, don't cry, things like that. So once my girlfriend at the time, she had knew I was feeling, depressed and things like that. She's the one who actually reached out to my mother. And then once my mother and my brother found out, they talked to me about everything. That helped push me through it. And then my father, he had got involved, even though it was still kind of like weird because part of me feeling like that was because I'm not talking to my dad as much. And then also finding a mentor, which I actually stumbled upon. And he gave me insight on, books to read, just the way to think about failures and, temporary defeats is, what they really are. And that just helped me see that, even though you do put your all into something and you don't accomplish it, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the road. Especially if you just, I had to just sit and look at, did I give it my all? And do I have any regrets? And I don't. I gave it my all. And I just had to know that, there's more in life. I was 23 when I stopped playing. So I'm like, you got 70 more years, you know what I'm saying? So it's so many things you can do, but it's just, building that confidence and spending more time with myself, like meditating or just visualizing things and just thinking is something that really helped me get out of that situation.
Nice. Now tell us a bit about your book.
Okay, yeah. So from Cleats To Loafers, it shares my journey from, trying to strive to reach the NFL. And then also it sheds light on the transition phase for athletes, post-athletics, and which I believe comes with a lot of struggles mentally and socially. So it gives readers insight into the mind of an athlete. Also, it has ideologies laid out that the reader can take and apply to their life. And it's not just for an athlete. Anyone who's in a phase in their life where they're trying to find out what's next, or how to transition from a certain career field that they were in, or finding their identity outside of what they've known for years. And so that's what it's about in a nutshell.
Did you learn a little bit of more things about yourself while actually writing this book?
Oh yeah. Unexpectedly too. I didn't think I was gonna go into it and start writing, and then I started learning stuff along the way. But the main thing I learned from it was that, I think once you're doing something for years on end and you have a goal in mind, you don't reach it, or you do reach it and it ends prematurely, you start to think, did I waste my time? Was it even worth it? What was the whole purpose of me doing this if I didn't get to the end goal and the end result that I wanted? And for me, I found out that, football's purpose in my life, among other things, but the main thing was me being able to form a relationship with my father. And then now I also learned that, okay, football brought that, relationship. It brought us closer together in life, but now it's leaving me with the responsibility to make sure that I build upon that and take that even further. So that's what I really learned about myself. And also I learned that another thing that can be therapeutic for a lot of people, especially athletes transitioning or, finishing their sport, their playing days, for me, writing was something that was therapeutic. Just putting all my thoughts on paper and then just having to be able to sit back and say, whatever I put down, somebody may judge me, somebody may not, but at the end of the day, there's other people that can relate. And if you could just help, one person, that's worth it.
What's some advice you would give to young student athletes who may have graduated or going through the process of playing on a collegiate level?
For me, I would, first of all, if you haven't graduated, I would have, you need to make sure your grades are in order, which it sounds cliche. Everyone says it. When I was in high school and they would say it, I'm like, all right, whatever. I got, good enough grades, I can make it. But I would say definitely academics. I would definitely say make sure that if you really want a scholarship, you have to practice like every day. You have to put the work in when you're practicing with your team. And then on the field, you got to do your best to perform because, a lot of guys now in the situation with COVID and things like that, there's some guys that I've seen because I help coach out of high school. They give 50% effort in practice that translates over to the game. Maybe you give them 75%. And now for guys who are trying to get a scholarship next year, you may not have a season. So you're going to be judged off your previous year and you may not receive a scholarship. So my advice, before anything is just go hard in the classroom and on the field. And then also I would say, go on as many visits as you can, even if they're not official visits, even if you're not a top recruit, I would still say to go check out schools, see what they like, find out what programs they offer. And then also if you are a kid that's getting recruited and you're around the coaches, find out what the coaches are like. Try to get to know them beyond just being your coach and things like that. So that's what I would say.
How can these young guys stay in shape, more so physically, but also mentally and emotionally? Because
Yeah.
I know how much it's affecting us all with no sports or
Right.
not being able to play.
Right. Yeah. So, well, first of all, physically, whatever you could do, if you could go outside and run up the street or do push-ups, that stuff is simple. It kind of speaks for itself. But of course, be safe if you're around other people. But mentally, I would say to try and, especially with this time where you have a lot more time on your hands, I would try and wake up in the morning and try to structure your day a certain way. Because if you get up and you start instantly thinking, oh, I'm not playing football, oh, this sucks, oh, I can't go out with my friends, I can't play this season, I might not get a scholarship. You got to start waking up and thinking about what you do have, even though it is a time where, people may be furloughed, people may not have the income that they had. You still have to think about, okay, what am I grateful for? I woke up, I have a roof over my head, things like that. And then I would try and, implement some type of meditation, which is something I started a couple of years ago. And it's something that helps me. It just, positive self-affirmations that make you feel better about yourself. So I think structuring your day to start off with what you're grateful for. And then also I think just setting up, time frames for you to find out other things that you're interested in and spend maybe an hour a day looking up some information that, you're interested in learning about, or, if you want to, I would also say stay in contact with your teammates and things like that, because, right now a lot of people are isolated. And, if you're a player who's maybe doing good and you're mentally stable right now, your teammate may not. So I think reaching out to each other and staying in close contact will help.
That's some good stuff. That is some good stuff.
Appreciate it.
I also heard you're real estate agent. So how did you get into that?
So I got into that. So kind of backtracking to when I stopped playing, I was actually working at a dog kennel, which I knew a lady who owned her dog kennel, and she told me, oh, come work here. I looked at it as a way to kind of give me some freedom to just do that, and then I can go work out as I was preparing for the first season in the professional indoor football league. So it worked for me. When I stopped playing, I came back and was working at the dog kennel. I hated it. I was like, I'm not doing this. I have a degree. Like, what am I doing here? Picking up after dogs and whatnot and stuff like that. But the owner told me I should get into real estate. And she was a Caucasian lady, but she really, she used to call me her son. She really is somebody who had a great heart. And she said, you should think about real estate. So I was like, all right, I thought about it before, never knew how to get into it. And she basically just gave me the steps, go ahead, take the test, do this, that, and the third. So that's how I got started in it. And then for anyone else who's out there who is interested in getting in any type of real estate, because there's so many different aspects, my advice would be to get a mentor within the real estate field. So I had met with a guy who I knew from a family friend, and he kind of showed me the ropes, would take me with him on meetings and things like that. You do a little work for free, until you get the experience and the knowledge. So that's how I got into real estate. So it's going on over 2 years now that I've been doing it.
I know you've talked about mentors a little bit so far. Just tell the people, how important is it to just have a mentor, somebody just to talk to in these times?
It is real. It's very important. It's very important. One thing I will say though about mentors is, like, some people may think you need 10 mentors and 15 mentors, but you really need maybe 2 at the most, And another important thing I say, because one of my mentors who I met through real estate, like he's an investor. He had bought my grandmother's property, and that's how I had met him. And he is a mentor outside of real estate. He's a mentor with, family, because I look at him and I see he has a wife, he has 3 kids, and the way he treats his family, the way he goes about his day, that really, has an impact on me. But he's somebody who tells me the truth. He keeps things, 100. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. But also, when you find a mentor, your mentor doesn't have to necessarily be just like you, because he's somebody who doesn't watch sports. I don't think he's played sports or anything like that. And where he's still able to pour into my life and help me in ways that maybe somebody who does watch sports all day, they may not be able to help me. So I think finding somebody that's a little bit different than you isn't a bad thing.
Good advice. What can we expect? What's next for Jared Johnston?
Well, right now I just started doing the From Cleats To Loafers interview series on my Instagram, and I initially wanted to do that in person and actually go to where the people are, if they're in close proximity, and go back to, their upbringings or wherever they grew up at, their high school, and kind of walk with them and interview them at the same time. But with everything, I just, got to do lives, which I really didn't want to do. I was like, man, I'm not trying to get on live and do this. So I had to kind of break out, with my shell and whatnot. But I'm doing that. I am working on a children's book, and it won't be called From Cleats To Loafers, but it'll be based around that idea of letting our kids know that there's so many things you can do, and not to take away from sports, because when I have kids, my kids most likely going to play sports too. If they are blessed to get a scholarship, I'm not going to tell them they can't do anything, like that. But and I got that idea from going to a school one day, talking to kids, and we had asked them what they want to be. They all said NBA or NFL player. And then we told them, don't write down NBA or NFL. And they had so many other career fields that they wanted to do, but it was just, surprising that they needed permission to say those things. So this book kind of gives kids the permission to think outside of the box. So I'm working on that. Also, I just finished doing a script because I want to turn this topic into a film, a feature film. So I just finished doing a script. Had to go back and take some stuff out, fix things up and whatnot. And I have some people that, you know, have came into my life, like I don't know, I guess it was God's work or whatever, but that are kind of in positions where I will be able to send it to, like, as far as production teams and things like that. So that's something I'm very, very passionate about. That's like number one, what I'm working on, because I feel like this topic is urgent and a lot of people need it. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. Trying to stay productive.
Got to.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Where can everyone follow you on social media, Twitter, all that good stuff?
Yeah, drop the socials, everything.
I don't have a Twitter. Don't have a Twitter. I might get one. I don't know, but
Oh, you got to get a Twitter, man.
I don't know. With
Twitter's
Twitter,
where it's at.
What's the point of Twitter? I mean, you really can't post pictures unless I'm wrong. It's more so, I just always thought it was more so people just want to rant all day and just tweet.
I guess.
You know, so I was like, I don't really know if I want to do all that. But I was thinking about it yesterday. I actually was like, maybe I should get a Twitter. I don't know. But on Instagram, that's what I use like 99% of the time. And my Instagram is just Jared, Jared, Johnston, Johnston, 1 of 1. That's my Instagram. And then my website is jared-johnston.com. So, and then also for the book from Cleats To Loafers, that's on Amazon. So you can find it on Amazon and just search from Cleats To Loafers. There's also a link in my Instagram profile that goes there as well.
Nice.
Any promo codes you got?
I don't.
No promo codes, not yet.
I'll work on that. Add it to the list of the things I'm working on, just for y'all.
Jared, thank you for stopping by and talking to us about everything. Definitely gonna check out that book. Seems like a good book. And keep doing big things, man. Keep doing big things.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciated being the first guest on y'all show. I was watching y'all, I believe it was your first episode on YouTube yesterday. Okay. I was driving like an hour away, so I was listening to it and everything. So I I'm happy to be the first guest. Definitely. Wish y'all.
This is gonna go down in history.
Yeah. And we're very appreciative of you just sharing your incredible story, and just hopefully that, you know, the goal for us is to continue to inspire just like you want to. And hopefully someone comes across this and maybe have been through the same situations that you and I both have faced as a collegiate student athlete. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Definitely. I appreciate it. Y'all take care.
All right. Thanks.
See you.
All right.